Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, I don't know what the name of this podcast is going to be, as we just started recording it already, and we usually tend to figure that out afterwards. But right now I'm going for a real, more of the same kind of vibe. I don't know. We were having a hard time trying to figure out what it is we're going to talk about, because it feels like what's on track for today is just a lot of the same.
That's right. I mean, it feels like every podcast at this point is, okay, what's wrong with the Kraken and what can they do about it? Some version of that. And so it got me thinking, and I went back and looked at just the various podcast titles so far that we've had this season. I think it really paints the picture well. So last week, of course, was an honest and frank conversation. The alternate title, This Homestand Will Define the Season. So we see how that's going so far. Then previously, What's Wrong with the Kraken, the sequel. Then Winter Classic jerseys and a win streak. So that one is probably the lone positive one there.
Yeah.
Then followed by Shoot the Bleeping Puck. Then Maddie is Good, actually. And now that sounds like a positive title, but that was kind of more in response to Maddie Benier's early struggles in that one. Then Trying to Make Sense of This. Then What's Wrong with the Kraken?
The original.
The original part one, but we didn't know it was part one yet. I mean, it's like, the Great War, I guess, before World War II happened.
Yes.
If you want to use that analogy. But then Two Built for the Playoffs, and then finally Bring on the Regular Season.
How about that, RJ? We've had two optimistic podcast titles, and we're in mid-December.
That's where we're at, Dylan.
All right. So, look, we are going to talk about everything. Obviously, the Kraken are right now in the middle of an 8-game losing streak. We'll get into more stats about that. You all know what's going on if you follow us. I will say this. We have some positive stuff to talk about, including Ryker Evans. I'm going to put that in at the end. So for those that are brave enough to listen to the whole thing, we can all leave hopefully on a good note. That's I think where we're going to go. We'll start of course with news and notes, but right before that, got to give the shout out to Queen Anne Beer Hall. RJ, we are just days away from the opening of their second location.
I know. I'm so excited to check out Moss Bay Hall. And also, I'm really excited for a great event that they have in the lead up to the Winter Classic. It is called Winter Hockey Hall. That will be December 30th that night. We are planning to be there, Dylan. And it's at the new location at Moss Bay Hall. It's going to be a great event ahead of the Winter Classic, a fun celebration of the really cool event. And I see you got the jersey behind you there, Dylan. I mean, we are both still super pumped for the Winter Classic coming up. But check out Winter Hockey Hall, December 30th, at the new Moss Bay Hall location.
Yeah, and we'll have tons and tons of, social media reminders and stuff about that in the lead up, but definitely was excited to get that news out there. Can't wait to try the pizza, RJ. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
Yep, Detroit style pizza. I know you have not been able to get that off your mind since I mentioned it.
I haven't. All right, then transitioning into news and notes. Unfortunately, RJ, not really many good news segments to talk about here, as all too often with this segment, more injuries. So I guess, which one do you want to start with?
Yeah, I mean, let's start with Andre Burakovsky. I mean, this whole thing is going to be an injury report, and the news is going to be pretty bleak. So Andre Burakovsky, this is the one that I feel the worst about, because he returns from a long-term injury, a 6+ week injury that he suffered 6 games into the season, plays just a portion of one game back for the Kraken, and of course in his first game back takes a hit along the boards in a very similar area of the ice to where he slammed to the boards and had the initial injury that kept him out for so long. So he is back to week with an upper body injury. The team says it's not related to the original injury that he had. Looked like a pretty similar area of his body, so I don't know about that, but regardless, he's going to miss some more time. He's back on injured reserve, and you just got to feel for this guy because he can't catch a break.
He can't. It's really unfortunate. I know so many of us have been so excited for this season for him just to be able to get back out there after the significant injury that ended his year last year. And it's just, he has not been able to get going at all because it just keeps happening to him. I was going to say, I guess technically RJ, right? It is an injury to the same place because I think all we ever got originally was upper body. So it's still upper body.
Yes, he's re-injured his upper body. But yeah, also, I mean, it's kind of puts it in perspective. But by the time he'll be able to come back from this, he'll have missed more time injured with the Kraken than he'll have actually played games.
Going back to last year, yeah,
going back,
crazy.
Yeah, in his total tenure with the Kraken, yeah.
No, it's just really unfortunate, and it's one of those things that, I mean, that's just like a luck thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's no way around it. It's just, it sucks. Bottom line.
Yeah, it was a routine hit. You know, it was nothing all that crazy. You know. So anyway, that's Andre Burakovsky. We can move on from that to another depressing injury story, and that is Philip Grubauer, who got hurt on a play a couple games ago. He pushed off from one side to the other, went from left to right, and hurt his lower body. I mean, it sure looked like a groin injury to us. It looked kind of similar to the one that he had last season, and he came up limping, was very slow to get up, and did not return to the game. And he has been placed on injured reserve, so that means he's out at least 7 days. That would be from yesterday. So, of course, the corresponding move, Chris Driedger has been called up for the AHL. Feel good for him, though, getting to be back in the NHL. And given the length that Grubauer is going to be out, he might even get a start too. So, I mean, I guess that's, the silver lining of this is, good on Chris Driedger. He, of course, had injury issues, quite a bit with the torn ACL, but he's worked his way back, and is back on the NHL roster.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just the goalie injury is just piling up for the Kraken organization, RJ, because as it was, right, Chris Driedger getting called up after having to pull back-to-back duties in Coachella Valley, like, it's just been a lot that this organization's had to deal with, unfortunately, this year, the string of bad luck. And for Philip Grubauer, he looked so good in that game too, RJ, against the Lightning before the injury. Oh, he was playing so well. Grubauer, I mean, he's really looked good all season. For him to have another injury like this after the one last year, really, really tough to see.
Yeah, I mean, that game, he was so good. He was the only reason the Kraken were really in it at all. Early in the game, the Kraken, it took them a while to wake up. They had a very bad first period. Grubauer held them in it. It's not the first time he's done that this season. And also, if you look at kind of the off the ice stuff, I mean, he wore a really cool new mask for Indigenous Peoples Night as well. And I think that is worth talking about. And he kind of found a way around league rules by intending to wear it more than one game, making it a regular mask. Yeah. But I think it just looks fantastic. I'm sure he'll wear it at some point once he comes back from injury. But just an all around, feel good night for Philip Grubauer until, that's the way it's been going for the Kraken this season. It all goes wrong.
Yeah, it really has been. It's all stuff like out of anybody's control too, which really, at least that aspect of it, the injury issue has been out of anybody's control, and that's been really unfortunate to see. And with the mask, I went on record for that post game. I think that's the best Kraken mask we've seen so far, all the years combined. I love that mask so much. They just did a fantastic job on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that. I think it's a fantastic mask. It just looks great. I wouldn't mind him keeping it regularly. And of course, debuted on Indigenous Peoples Night, and, maybe kind of find a loophole around the league's rules, which we've seen other players, with Marc-Andre Fleury wearing that in warmups. Grubauer gets it into a game, but he found a way to do it.
Yep, exactly. So that was really cool to see. And then, unfortunately, though, the injury train doesn't stop there.
Yes, we have one more injury for you, and that is Justin Schultz. So the Kraken defenseman got hit in the face by a puck in the last game. Well, I guess 2 games ago in the Tampa
Lightning
game, got hit in the face by a puck late in the game, and he did miss the following game last night, so against Minnesota. So we don't know how long he's out. Hackstall, of course, mentioned he got hit in the face by a puck, asked whether he'd be available for the next night, said, I have no idea. And then before the Wild game said he would not be available. We don't have any more details on that. We know it's an upper body injury. We know it's a facial injury,
Yeah.
but hopefully Schultz is okay. I haven't seen him. Sometimes you'll see players that are hurt just kind of walking around. I haven't seen him, so I don't know how bad his face looks, but I imagine it's certainly not good.
Yeah, and again, it's unfortunate. It's another injury, somebody who dealt with injuries last season, dealing with them again this year, not something you want to see, similar to Berkey, similar to Gru. Um, it's just one of those. I guess the one silver lining is, Ryker had been called up already and has been playing okay, and we'll talk about him later. He's been playing better than okay. So I guess there is that element of it there. With this latest injury, but yeah, I just at some point it's got to stop, right? Like it's got to normalize. They're like my fantasy team right now, RJ. Just everybody hurt forever.
That's right. I think your fantasy team actually has it worse than the Kraken right now. But still, it is rough for the Kraken. I think you are seeing, the injury bug. It's random, right?
Yep.
And the Kraken were uncommonly healthy last season, and I think you are seeing that start to bounce back and hit them this year. I couldn't tell you why it happens that way, but it seems like that's what's happening.
Right. And then the one thing, and I'm going to say it because I know some people are starting to talk about it. The big concern with a lot of this, RJ, beyond just the fact that it's injuries, you're concerned for the players and all that, is the fact that this Winter Classic game is coming up. Right? Like, we want the injuries to stop. We want these guys to be able to play in that game. Like, that's important to a lot of people. And we're getting to the point where, yeah, if you do become week to week, or, you get placed on IR, that starts becoming a question mark. And that's really unfortunate too. Because in addition to them having to miss games and not be able to, play the game that they love and all that stuff, I would really hate for anybody to have to miss that game.
Yeah, it's going to be a truly special experience, and the players want to be out there for it. You know how much it means to players to play in a game like that. You only get, maybe one or two chances in a whole career to play in an outdoor game like that. So the guys want to do it.
Yep. Let's go ahead and transition from that, RJ, into something else a little bit. And we talked about the Grubauer mask. I know I'm adding this onto the docket. It's not there. We didn't talk about it yet, but we did see the goaltending pads that everybody has for the Winter Classic. And I think we should mention those and talk about that a little bit, because we already talked about Grubauer's mask for Indigenous Peoples Night. I know, let's talk about the masks for the Winter Classic.
Yes, let's do that. Because on the same day that we saw the Indigenous Peoples Night mask from Grubauer, he also was kind enough to show us his Winter Classic mask, which we all noticed immediately when he had it there in his stall, standing out among the other masks. I like it. I think it's, I'm trying to pull up a picture.
Yeah,
here,
no,
trying to get the details on it. Go ahead.
It has good vintage flair. I like the fact that he works in all the colors from the jersey, the Winter Classic jersey. That all looks really cool. I mean, the big thing is those little holographic Kraken logos.
I love those.
That just catch the light, and you only see it when they are catching the light. Otherwise, that section of the mask looks flat, it looks matte, but then you see that highlight, and you just know for an outdoor game, as he's turning his head and the sun would be hitting that, it would just look beautiful. It would shimmer. It might look kind of similar to fish scales, is kind of what I imagine it kind of looking like, or maybe a kraken in the water. I don't know. And I thought that was really cool, because I don't think we've seen that before.
No, I don't think so. Maybe on one of Drieger's masks, I seem to remember he had the smaller logos like that, but I don't know if it had the same effect. But definitely, I think that was the coolest part of this mask. I also like running down the top of it, along the forehead. You have the Seattle letters, but they're not just neatly placed, in an organized fashion. They're kind of, they're off center. They're kind of like with the Seattle S, with the Metropolitans. And as you can see behind you in the YouTube version of this podcast, the Kraken letters on that jersey. Yeah. Behind you, they're kind of off center. They look a little silly there, but it goes with the whole effect of everything. So I do like the choices there.
Yeah, no, me too. It looks really good. And then we saw Joey Dacord's mask, RJ, which for a specialty game, I don't know that you could ever do better than this, to be perfectly honest, right? Incorporating the city, incorporating the venue of the game, as he has, a Mariners baseball card mask.
It's perfect for a game like this. It is absolutely perfect. And yeah, Yeah, I don't want to proclaim a winner and a loser, but I think Joey's mask is certainly my favorite of the two, just because he's really gone kind of above and beyond with the Mariners connection. Because I mean, that's what one of the things that's so special about this game. He's got the old baseball cards on there. He's got Ken Griffey Jr. He's got Ichiro. He's got newer players like Cal Raleigh, J.P. Crawford. He's got current Mariners on there as well. It's just an awesome mask. I love the design. Shifty does it again. His mask art is Shifty is just awesome. Always brings good stuff. And then on the top, you've got like the mountains, you've got some trees, you've got some nice landscape stuff on the top. It's great.
Yeah, no, I love that, one side is like the past Mariners and then the other side is current Mariners. And if you look up towards the top, he even has like the old school Mariners like trident logo and then the current, S logo with on the side of the current ones. Like there's just a lot of details. The more you look at the mask, the more you pick up. I absolutely love it. I also love, RJ, the actual cage part is painted. And it has like a pattern to it. That's something that, again, I don't really remember seeing before.
No, I haven't noticed that. Certainly not any kind of Kraken mask. And I think the whole thing is given a bit of a worn look to it. If you look at the very front by the chin, it looks like it has the effect of some of the paint kind of being scraped off a little bit as though it had already been used. And you see, the blue on the cage, and it all kind of gives it that, that lightly used feel as well.
Yeah, so that one was fantastic to see. And then we saw the pad setups for everybody as well. Those all look great. Obviously, kind of going back with the leather look a lot is what it seems like to me. And I'm a sucker for that, RJ. It gets me every year when goaltenders do that for these games.
Yeah, and I think it also works well with the color scheme of the jersey, where you kind of have that off-white on it, and you really are going for that vintage feel. Like, I don't know how well it would work maybe for, well, I guess Vegas kind of has not the gold, but like the brown or whatever. So I don't think it always works, but I think in this case it does. You have Joey Daccord going with basically his same pad design as he already has right now, but replacing the white with kind of that brown, that vintage brown. And then Philip Grubauer going with a slightly more different look, where he has mostly, I like how he's gone with the two-tone like brown and then also kind of that lighter like beige on the outside. I think that creates a really nice effect.
Agreed.
And the ice blue, the little stripe of ice blue on the pads, I think goes really well with the overall colors of everything in a way I wouldn't have expected if I hadn't looked at it.
Right. No, I think that is something that looks really, really solid. Like I'm with you. It's not something that I probably would have thought of. Granted, I'm not like, somebody who does this, but they look like really good, solid, old school pads. Like but for the Kraken. Like, I don't know. I just love it. I
just hope we get to see it all come together.
I know.
That's my worry, is I want to see that all out there on the ice. So get well soon, Gru.
Yep, definitely. And then, we saw some for Drieger too, right?
Did we?
Am I wrong? So. No, I guess not. No, those must have been Joey's then. Yeah. Joey's, I don't know. I prefer the vintage styling of Gru's over Joey's pads personally.
Yeah, I do too. No, I like the pads for Gru over Joey, but then I like Joey's mask better. So I guess it evens out. I guess I hope we don't see any Winter Classic stuff for Drieger, because just what that would mean for Grubauer.
Yeah, I guess that would be one of those early indication things to be looking for. All right, so from there, RJ, into the facts of the matter, what the Kraken are dealing with right now. Look, they're in the middle of an 8-game skid. They've got 2 points over the last 8 games from 2 overtime losses. In their last 5 games, RJ, they've been shut out twice. They've only managed to score 6 goals. They've allowed 15 in the last 5 games. Not a very good goal differential there. It just feels like every week we're just trying to talk about it, and it's just like, what's going wrong? What can they do to fix this? How can they get out of it? We are now halfway through that homestand, RJ, that we were talking about as, their season-defying moment. They needed to come in and they needed to perform well on this homestand, and they haven't. And the latest one was another shutout loss in a pretty miserable, boring game to watch against the Minnesota Wild. It was a very low event. Kraken, I felt like it was their best focus and effort game that they've had, but at the same time, they never looked dangerous.
Right. It was certainly kind of a boring game to watch. I think everyone got that impression from it. And you're right. They hung in there. They brought focus through the whole game. And this one might even be kind of the most, disheartening if you're looking for reasons to turn things around, just because, they really didn't make the kind of characteristic mistakes or have the characteristic bad starts that they've had. They just looked like the team that came up on the wrong side of the skill divide, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one team was able to kind of manufacture a goal or two, and the other team wasn't. And especially when you saw those power play chances that they kept going to the same play, that cross crease pass, that clearly they had identified something in the pre-scout. They had told the players this is what we're going to do, and they just couldn't get a bounce on those.
No, and then they just kind of kept going back to the well. And that's part of a larger conversation that we were kind of starting to have on post game. And I think, we can better flesh it all out here than on a post game where we have to get through all the different topics. And that's, something that's been talked about at various points. You and I have used it to point to things that the Kraken are doing well. A lot of people have been able to point to analytics as a reason to say, look, the Kraken are performing well. But one of the things that I have noticed, RJ, when it comes to like the publicly available analytics model, mainly MoneyPuck, because that's the most used one, I feel, a lot of it just comes down to, when you're talking about expected goals, just how close to the net are you? All the shot attempts taken closer to the net just worth more than ones taken from further away, without any of the context around it. I know we've kind of talked about the deficiencies that sometimes expected goal models can have. And, I just want to say from the beginning, as we get into this discussion, teams have their own proprietary models, have access to far more information from the NHL than any of us have publicly, right? Like the teams, their models absolutely take more into account than what the publicly available ones are. Certainly what MoneyPuck does. Their models are not that simple. I think that there is total value in having analytics. There is a reason why so many NHL teams, including the Kraken, invest heavily into it. And then also for the people who are just like, look, expected goals don't really mean anything. You need the result. Agreed. The result is what matters at the end of the day. But again, it's one of those things that when you look at analytics and you look at certainly the team-based ones, right, you're talking about sample size wise, they are a good indicator of which teams are good, which teams are playing poorly, all of that kind of stuff. It's just that the Kraken are kind of an outlier at the moment, and it's making it not look as great.
That's right. I mean, the Kraken are still at the bottom of that list as far as, goal differential above expected. And so it's something that people definitely, put a lot of attention into. And I think, that's via MoneyPuck, right? That one,
Yes,
that list
yes.
that, yeah.
But that might have been JFresh, actually.
Or was it JFresh?
I'm gonna pull it up real quick. But yeah, I mean, either way, it's one of those things where, again, like I said, we know the NHL has puck and player tracking, right? That is not publicly available, right? There's lots of other things that when you are investing and you have the resources to do it, you can go in and you can have things where you can put things into proper context that you're not able to on, say, a MoneyPuck, when it comes to what was actually going on the ice when this shot attempt was taken, rather than just kind of, well, how close to the goaltender was it?
Right. And different models take different things into account as well. I think like the MoneyPuck model uses time between shots, like for, say, rebound shots or something, as like kind of a proxy for, how well the goalie can get repositioned. Yeah. But there's other ways to do that as well. And there's some healthy debate among very smart people about what elements matter and what elements don't, and which you should have in a model. But yeah, it is from JFresh, data via Top Down Hockey.
Yeah.
Has the Kraken at last in the league in goal differential above expected.
Yeah, so I just want to put that out there. Like, the analytics, they are useful. All that kind of stuff is good. Vast majority of the time, the goal expected numbers and expected goals, all that kind of stuff will give you an idea of which teams are performing better and how well the team is performing, or an individual player and all that kind of stuff. But it is not the end all be all, right? There are instances where you have a team like the Kraken where the standings don't line up with how well they're playing. I mean, you look at MoneyPuck, you have the Yanni Gourde line up in the top 10 for just forward lines, RJ. Matty Beniers' line at 11th, so Kraken 2 of the top 11 lines in hockey when it comes to expected goals percentage. Like, that's a great thing to look at, but at the same time, we know lines are struggling to score, right? Like it hasn't translated, but I wanted to at least like talk about that and get that out there, because I do know there's a lot of people that are like, look, expected goals, that's great and all, but like we need them to be scored. And that's true. Like I'm not trying to discount that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So when it comes to the rest of things, RJ, first off, this past week, I've been thinking about things. I've had conversations with you. We've talked about it on post games. I am starting to think that the Kraken need to change their system. And we've defended Hackstall a lot. I would still defend him. I still don't think a lot of these problems are his fault. But I do think that it is time for the Kraken to maybe start adjusting what their system is a little bit more in regards to, look, they are trying to get in close. They are trying to generate those higher quality chances. And I just don't know that it fits with some of the personnel that they have, mainly Matty Beniers and Alexander Wenberg. And so my question to you, RJ, is, look, those are players that tend to do better, maybe more from a perimeter with the ability to move around more freely in the offensive zone, right? Rather than playing in the slot, which is more so where the system is pushing them. Do you think the Kraken are in need of a change of system, or is this just me looking for something here as they're in this skid?
I think you have won me over on that maybe you do need a change of system. And what really convinced me was watching that Kraken Devils game. Good effort by the Kraken, a very close hockey game, but watching the other side of the ice, watching what the Devils were doing and the way that they were playing, where they had their 1-2 center punch of Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. And watching what Jack Hughes was able to do in the offensive zone and the way he was allowed to operate. He was given a lot of time and space and kind of work through the outside, and was really able to unlock that creativity, use his vision to make plays. And you know, Hughes isn't the biggest player, certainly. You know, he can kind of get pushed off the puck if he tries to go net front. That's not really his game. Yeah. But he is incredibly skilled, and he's a very smart player. And I think, you know, that's ultimately the kind of player, you know, maybe not up to Hughes' level, because I mean, you know, Jack Hughes is a hell of a player, but that Matty Beniers could be. That style of play, I think he could benefit from. And watching the huge difference on the ice of the way that one team is attacking versus the way the other team is attacking with a similar player, I just found myself wishing, like, man, put Matty Beniers in some of those spots that Jack Hughes was in, and give him the opportunity to make those plays with some extra time and space there. Let him work around the perimeter and use that vision that he has that's so special. And then also, when you have Nico Hischier out on the ice, you know, kind of using him as more of a, you know, for defensively minded center, you know, more of a distributor there, and having his wingers do a lot of that work down low for him instead of asking everyone to just clump up right at the net and try and get those rebounds. I thought, well, that's the kind of game that Alex Wenberg likes to play. You know, he could be, you know, again, a poor man's Nico Hischier. I think Hischier's, you know, a much better player, but I just found myself looking at the Devils and the way they played and thinking, that would be a better stylistic fit for the personnel that the Kraken have. And I understand the temptation to want to try and manufacture goals by throwing as many pucks at the net as you can into those high danger areas and just trying to kind of whack home those rebounds, get tips, get screens, things like that. And that's often a way to get around when you have goal scoring difficulties, because those can be some of the ones that take the goalie out of the play. You know, if you get a really good screen on a play, look at the, you know, the Bjorkstrand goal the other night. Is that still the most recent goal the Kraken have scored? But you look at like the Bjorkstrand goal the other night, and you have Yanni Gourde just doing a nice flyby screen on Andrei Vasilevsky, one of the best goalies in the world. And he just, you know, can't quite see it. And you have a shot from, you know, an area that's maybe not too dangerous, and boom, it goes in because the goalie can't track it. You know, there are ways to get around it, but I think the personnel the Kraken have, that other teams like that play the style that they're playing do have,
right,
is these big guys who can outmuscle guys in front of the net, who can make those rebounds work because you can establish body position. You can be dominant net front. The Kraken don't have anybody like that. The one guy you could make an argument for is Jaden Schwartz, and he's not in the lineup. He's going to be missing for another little while. And even then, he's only, you know, 5'10", I think. You know, he's not a big guy. He's just really strong, and he goes to the net. But I just think the personnel isn't the right fit. So I know I've talked for a long
No, it's
time here,
fine.
Dylan, but like, I know you feel a similar
Right.
way.
Yeah.
And tell me, I guess, how you prefer them to play too. Cause I mentioned just, play like the Devils, but I know you're a better X's and O's guy. Like explain exactly what that means.
Right. I mean, I guess there's a couple things in here. I would say like Ty Cartier could be net front, right? Just he's not again tall, but he's very strong. So
Mm-hmm.
there is that element to it. I was
But
just
you
gonna
need a
say
level of
that
skill there
you
too.
do, you
Like you
do.
need a level of high end
Right,
skill.
right. And I was gonna say I think the last goal was actually the Jared McCann goal, but it was again still a kind of one of those plays where it's a shot from out wide, but Vasilevsky can't track it the whole way. I think that what's weird about this whole situation is RJ, the system that the Kraken are playing right now. Tell me it wouldn't be the textbook most perfect thing for Shane Wright to walk into. Because this is the way Shane Wright plays, right? He's a big body guy. He's a strong guy. He likes to play down the middle as a center and generate all his scoring chances from there, walking in on a goaltender, being there for rebounds, being there to receive a pass from behind the net, right? Like that is perfectly built for how Shane Wright likes to be aggressive and attack in the offensive zone. He's just not on the team right now, unfortunately. With when it comes to say what system they should be running, I will always point to with Matty specifically. If you watch the tape from him from Michigan, you go back and watch any of his highlight videos or like my old scouting reports on him, you'll see this. If you go back and you watch the very first point he ever got in the NHL against Calgary in Calgary, it was on the goal from Ryan Donato, but it was a play that Matty 100% manufactured. And it was another instance of he gets the puck, he goes around the zone from the perimeter, he sees everything, and then he sees that he can make a complete cross-zone diagonal pass to Ryan Donato, who is open. He sees the lane, he hits him, Donato buries it, boom, you have a goal, right? Matty Beniers is the kind of guy when he is a playmaker, when he's going to produce points, that needs to have that ability to move around with the puck, right? Have the freedom to move around with the puck, see what the defense is doing, and then he is going to exploit whatever weaknesses that the defense has. It requires a little bit more of a patient style of play from the team. It's one of those things where you have to have player movement involved because Matty Beniers is going to be walking around. You need the other guys to know how they have to cycle in regard to what he's doing, because you don't want him to walk to where, say, Eberle is, and Eberle just continues to stand there, right? Then there's not really going to be a play for Matty to make. So it requires more of a free-flowing style of offense, slow the game down a little bit. It kind of goes against the more dump and chase, get it into the corner and then just throw it net front for the rest of the guys streaking into the zone approach that they've been going with. It would require either controlled entries or get in the offensive zone. You can still dump it in the offensive zone, but then instead of throwing it net front, throw it back to the point, right? Give it to a defenseman, let everybody get into the offensive zone, then give the puck to Matty Beniers and let him do his magic. And I think that would be something that I would like to see from them. And to be perfectly honest, RJ, that could help the defense a lot too, because you're playing a much more controlled style of game. The defense, you're right, you don't have to worry about, say, if the pass goes bad to net front, or, okay, the rebound shoots out, but the defense was able to collect it really quick. Now they can push the puck up and break out of their zone very fast, and the Kraken aren't necessarily ready for it. In this sort of system, if Matty Beniers is walking around the offensive zone with the puck, you're a defenseman already, right? If Matty Beniers goes to make a play and there's a turnover, which will happen from time to time, that's just how it goes. The defense, they're very much set up at the blue line. They can adjust to that. You'll always have two defenders back, which is something the Kraken have struggled with this year. I just think taking a more patient style of approach to the offense would do wonders. I think it would really help out Matty Beniers because his confidence looks really shaken right now. He's playing a system that he doesn't look fully comfortable in, and he's just not producing. And those are things that young players struggle with, and it's natural for him to be struggling with. But I really think that's the solution is, I don't know, maybe would you call that old school, RJ, to kind of go kind of more patient in the offensive zone? Feels a little older school.
I guess so. I mean, with the emphasis on controlled entries, and it also highlights just how different it is from what they're running right now.
Yeah.
If you've watched the last few Kraken games, where what the strategy is. But I guess so. I tend to think of like old school, just you go in, you dump it in, you chase, you bang bodies. But that's not necessarily like the
That's
case.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, if you go back, it depends how far back you want to go, really.
Yeah.
If you're going to in the 80s or something, I feel like there are a lot of controlled entries.
Yes.
And but you had some of the most skilled players, find success that way. I'm telling you, nobody loves the button hook like Matty Beniers.
Yeah.
Have him come into the zone, just button hook, go back up to the point, get his head up and see what there is. I mean, the other thing I'd like to see too, if you want to keep the same style of zone entry, as you mentioned, have the puck, work it back to the point, but then also have Matty Beniers, have the center just come back up toward the point and have a third guy up high. You see teams do that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. You could have the winger dump it in, go after it and chase it, and then Matty Beniers goes to the half boards on whatever side of the ice that is. Right? Like and then he's there to have the puck come back to him. Like you can easily do that kind of stuff. Sidney Crosby is, I guess, the name that's coming to mind for me as far as a more patient guy who just kind of goes to where he needs to be. I know obviously this is a big comparison to be making, but if you look throughout the years with what Crosby's done in Pittsburgh, RJ, I think you see something similar to that, where it is look, get the puck in your best player's hands or on his stick and let him work, right? Let him take his time and do what he needs to do, and a lot of times it ends in success.
Yeah. And I mean, question for you, Dylan, do you think there's enough skill at this point? Because we're not talking about the Kraken team on paper, we're talking about who they have right now that they can actually put on the ice, because that kind of thing does require that you have enough skill around a player like Matty Beniers that can kind of make that work. Do you think, because I look, if you're playing devil's advocate here and you're looking at it from the other side, Hackstall would never say this publicly, no coach would, but you could say, look, with the injuries we don't have enough skill to play that kind of game. We have to go in there and try and grind it out and just get pucks to the net and hope one goes for us. Do you think that you have the necessary skill to put around a guy like that right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue against that. Like, you got 6 goals in your last 5 games. It's not working either. What do you have to lose from an offensive standpoint? But I'd
be with you.
Right. But I would also argue that it doesn't actually require more skill. It requires chemistry, right? We saw this. Matty Beniers played arguably his best NHL hockey with Ryan Donato, right? Ryan Donato's got some skill. Nobody would say he's the most skilled guy on any team he's on, right? Like, it worked because Ryan Donato understood, again, going back to that first ever assist for Matty Beniers, he understood where Matty was on the ice, where he could go to create a passing lane for himself, that Matty could get him the puck, and where he would have then also the time and space to get a good shot off, right? You need players, rather than that are skilled, you need smart players who can work around Matty Beniers. I mentioned Sidney Crosby. How many years did he play with Pascal Dupuis and Chris Kunitz on his wings, RJ? They were not the most skilled guys in the world, right? I don't think they would say that they were, but it worked as a line because they understood what Crosby was doing and they got themselves open knowing how he played because they all had chemistry with each other. And so I think more so than it being a skill issue, it's just a matter of finding the wingers that Matty has confidence in and finding the wingers that have chemistry with Matty Beniers so that they know, hey, look, when he button hooks on the right side, this is where he likes to go, right? When he button hooks on the left side, I have to do this instead. That's the kind of thing that I feel like you need, rather than just say, look, stick a Willie Nylander on his wing, right? And everything will be fine. That works for everybody. But I think when you are going with a player who's going to, more so play a cerebral game, you just need smart players around them rather than the skilled ones, because they'll put themselves in positions where you don't have to be a skilled guy to put it in the, yawning cage that you're going to have because the goaltender's so out of position. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And like, do you have any line mates? I mean, you've had a little bit of time to think about any line mates that you'd like to see specifically tried, because they've gone with Karchi and Eberle for a while. And if you want to talk chemistry, those are the guys that he probably has the most time with, certainly Jordan Eberle. And then of course he's got that experience with Karchi where it feels like it always works out. But is there anyone else you'd like to see them try? Or do you think just it should be a different system there with those three?
I think it could probably be a different system with those three. The one person that I feel like consistently Matty's been able to be creative with, and this is especially if you go back and look at the playoff run last year, it was Ty Cartier, right? Like, they seem to have something where they think along the same lines, right? They think in the same way as they enter the offensive zone. One of them always seems to be where the other one would want someone to be. So I think I would explore it with Ty Cartier. I think Jordan Eberle's a really smart player. I'm sure if you freed him up to move around in the offensive zone more, he could. Because to be perfectly honest, RJ, I don't know that dump and chase really suits him as a winger anyway. Like, I think you're probably helping him out too. So I think you could get by with just that. But otherwise, I mean, you know, you just look at like the more cerebral players on the roster, right? The guys that do it based off of their smarts rather than their skill. And I think Oliver Bjorkstrand, first and foremost, right? We've seen him play north-south. We've seen him play east-west. We've seen him have production this year on 3 different lines. I thought he was good the brief time that we saw him playing with Matty Beniers earlier in the season. So I would probably try a Ty Cartier, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Matty Beniers line, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind moving Bjorkstrand there for that line. I mean, I think just the real hesitation is just breaking up that incredible line of Tolvanen and Gord Bjorkstrand that is just doing so much work for you. Yeah, I mean, that's the tough part with the injuries, right? Is that, you know, you want to bring somebody up to kind of fill in, and yet, you know, it creates a hole somewhere else.
Because we know, you know, really that if you don't pay attention to minutes played, I think still the best line the Kraken have had this year was Tolvanen, Gord, Burakovsky. Like, they only had like 9 minutes together, but they absolutely dominated while they were together. And so that's still something that I just have in the back of my mind. The problem is Berkey's been just continuously out of the lineup, unfortunately. But yeah, all in all, it's one of those things where I feel like, and this is the one thing that I do feel like is the most within Hackstall's control, RJ, as we broaden it back out to maybe the coaching picture, would be to change up the systems. And I understand that it's really hard to do that, especially when we're talking about a massive change the way we're talking about right now. It's extremely difficult to do that mid-season. Like, very, very hard to just change everything that you're asking your team to do mid-season. It's something that you would have to slowly start implementing. But I do feel like that is something that is within his purview. It is something he has control over, and it is something that I would like to see.
Yeah, and it's tough, especially with the grind of a schedule that they're having right now, too. You have limited practice time. And also, just even if you decide to make that kind of wholesale change, it's going to take a while to fully implement and make sure that it's down the way you want it. And, you know, it's another question we, you know, haven't really touched on a ton, but like, if you're Hackstall, do you know that you have that much time?
Yeah, I guess
at a certain point, you need, you know, if it's going to take maybe 4 or 5 more games, or potentially 4 or 5 more losses to fully implement that, you know, is that a gamble you're willing to take?
Right. I mean, and that is part of this, right? Like, is this something that could save the season? Maybe, but like realistically, no, just because it's going to take time. And I don't know that the Kraken have time. I guess the only person who really knows the answer to that would be Hackstall, right? Like, it would be him, it would be Lewicki, it would be Ron Francis, right? The people in charge of making said decision and communicating where Hackstall's standing is to Hackstall are the only people that would actually know the answer to that. If you're Hackstall and you have been assured you have the rest of the year, I understand still being like, look, I got to turn this around and quick, and doing a wholesale change of the offensive system isn't going to be quick, and it'll still be ugly in the meantime, and maybe that puts us just too far back to make something happen. So I totally understand taking this approach. If it's one of those where the team has just been like, look, we've been besieged by injuries, we're kind of writing the season off, we understand the spot you're in, don't worry about this year, don't worry about next year, right? Then you might as well just get a jump on it now, right? Start working towards something like that. Start finding the players that have chemistry with Matty Beniers. Start working on those things. Go ahead and keep this system for a second line if you're going to, say, be a seller at the deadline and be able to call up a Shane Wright. It's one of those things that I understand why Hackstall wouldn't change if he doesn't have long-term assurances, right? I 1000% understand that. I probably wouldn't either. But if he does have those long-term assurances, then I would say, you know, it's probably worth going ahead and doing, because right now you have nothing to lose, right? Like, you're already you can't win anyway. You might as well do something.
Right. I mean, you're just kind of hitting your head against the wall again and again, and hoping that it breaks. And so far it hasn't. And that's getting to be a problem. Yes. But yeah, I think that all comes with the change in mindset, that shift that, certainly won't happen yet, but if you decide that, okay, this is a development season, this is a transitional season, this is about getting better for next year, then that change comes with that decision, and then everything that comes with it, like a calling up Shane Wright, really, potentially moving on from some veterans, giving the guys who you're going to build around more ice time. And I don't think we're there yet. At this point, they're just trying to get a win to help turn things around and hopefully get the momentum going the other way. That's more a conversation. And if that decision is made, it'll be in 2024. It'll be after the new year, I think. And then we'll have a longer podcast talking about, okay, here's what you do now that decision's been made.
Exactly. It's just when does the organization hit the point, RJ, where they feel like they have to do something, and what is that thing that they have to do? And I talked about this last night, and then I promise it's going to get positive here in just a little bit, everybody. And you weren't really around for it, but it's one of those things where when organizations are stuck in that, right? Let's say they really do feel like they need to be competitive this year at some point, right? The easy move for organizations in this position, RJ, is to make a coaching change, because it's the easiest and cleanest thing that you can do. You don't have to worry about a big locker room shakeup by trading away a specific player, adding somebody new, the chemistry being developed, right? Friendships, all that kind of stuff needing to happen mid-season in the midst of something tough, right? When you can yes, it's still a big deal to move a coach, but especially if you have an internal candidate who would just take over, it's not as large a shakeup kind of thing. So that's the only reason why I think the coaching change is even on the table for the organization, RJ, is just because at some point you hit a point where you have to tell both the team and your fan base that, yes, we are being proactive at some point.
Right. When a losing streak gets up into the 8-game range and we're looking at potentially 9 or 10 or, a franchise long losing streak, it doesn't matter what team you are. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. Levers have to get pulled at a certain point, and everybody knows that. I mean, just because you have a group of fans that's just like, okay, what are you doing about this? Yeah. And there are a number of different things you can do. But as you mentioned, Dylan, I think, often moving on from a coach is probably the easiest thing to do. And certainly if you're like a GM making that decision as well, having to put yourself then in position to make a trade when you're in a bad negotiating spot, that's going to reflect on you as well. There are no really good options, but often moving on from the coach can be the easiest. But I do wonder, I mean, that's the big question. We kind of asked it last week.
Yep.
At what point does the team feel like, okay, we have to do something? As far as what they do, we just don't know enough about this organization yet because they've never been in this situation.
Exactly.
So I couldn't tell you what they would do when they decided, okay, we need to do something.
Yeah.
But at what point, Dylan, do you think they get to the point where they realize we have to do something? Is it the end of the homestand?
I would have said, if you asked me last night, I would have said it was right then and there, right? After that loss to the Wild, you're shut out again. You didn't particularly look very good. That to me would have been the time. I mean, we're sitting here, it's nearly 1:00 and nothing has happened. So I'm assuming they're not going to do anything. Although I'm sure the deep dive curse could prove me wrong if it wanted to. I think then it goes back to the homestand, right? If you drop the next 3 games of the homestand and you go from being winless on a 4-game road trip to then being winless on a 6-game homestand with then a previous loss at home to kick that off, and you're now 0 for 11, essentially. You're on an 11-game skid. You just dropped 6 games in front of your home fans. I don't see how any organization in any sport, in any circumstance, doesn't do something after that. Whatever
I'm totally
it
with
is.
You.
Yeah.
Yes. Whether it's letting the coach go, whether it's a trade, whether it's, emergency call up Shane Wright, play him on the second line and see if that can give the guys a jolt, some large change. Yeah. If they can't get a win on this homestand, absolutely. And I'm with you. I think, after the last game, I really thought we might see something. I got up early this morning to just make sure, in case some news dropped in the morning, that we were on top of it. It's one of those where I think every day you have to kind of look out for it, but the end of the homestand would certainly kind of punctuate everything.
Yeah, I think that's really what we're looking at. Now, on the flip side, RJ, Kraken, they've got the 7 loser points this year. It's helped them tread water because, yes, they are tied with only 8 wins with teams such as the Sharks at the bottom of the standing, right? Or I guess it's just the Sharks at the bottom there, RJ, with the fewest amount of wins. They're tied with Montreal with only 5 regulation wins, which is certainly not good. Like, nobody would say that's a good spot to be in. However, RJ, you look at, say, the wild card race, and the Kraken, it's not like they would need a 2019 level Blues run to make the playoffs. Like, that's what's nuts about the situation.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to think about it, but you look at it and they're only 5 points back. I mean, yes, the Coyotes have some games in hand, but you're only 5 points back of the final wild card spot. And that weirdly is kind of striking distance. They're really not out of it. And also there's a lot of the season left. I know it feels like, and certainly when you're just on an 8-game losing streak, and that's a 10th of your season that you've just dropped losses. But with the amount of overtime losses, like they're 6 games under NHL 500. Yeah. And, we saw the Oilers in kind of a similar hole earlier this season. Already they're back up to NHL 500. They're 12-12-1. They've shown that teams can turn it around and get right back in the playoff hunt. And so I think it's important to separate. And I know people kind of reacted, some people on the post game when we mentioned this, like, what are you guys, crazy? Like, this, look at what's going on. And I think it's important to separate. When you look at the stand, there's 2 things. One, when you look at the standings and you see the position they're in, and looking at, I think, the reality of it and seeing that they're really not out of it. A team in that position with that amount of points, given what the standings are, that team is not out of it. And they're still very much in a playoff hunt. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of it, which is, what reasons has a given team given us to believe that they can get back into that playoff hunt, that they can turn things around? And so I look at the standings and I see this team isn't out of it. Mm-hmm. They're very much in the playoff race still. But then I look at the other side of it and say, they have given us no reason this season to believe that they can get back into it. None. You have to just rely on hope that they can get back to something resembling what they were last year. And, it's not nothing. You look at the roster on paper. I mean, that's the other part we've pointed to all season is, this roster on paper should be a team that can compete for a playoff spot. Yep. And I still believe that. Yep. But we're not seeing any indicators on the ice that that's the case. So I think you can take both of those and realize they can both be true at the same time. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's one of those things. Look, if they win the next 3 games and they finish out the homestand 3-3, right? But they win the next 3 games, that's 6 more points. All of a sudden, you're looking at this Kraken team having 29 points. I guarantee you they'll leapfrog, the Wild or Flames somewhere in there, right? Like they would really move up in the standings. It wouldn't be so bad. I know Nashville, right? They're first in the wild card spot. They're 7 points ahead of the Kraken, but they've only got 1 game in hand on the Kraken, right? I know, like, people look at the Arizona situation, they're like, oh, that's a lot of games in hand. Nashville doesn't really have that many games in hand, right? They're up there. Like it's not as bad as it was earlier in the season. A lot of the teams have caught up to the Kraken in games played. So I think that's another thing. I think you mentioning the Oilers is really positive too, because yes, they've won 7 in a row. Look at how they literally have just skyrocketed up the standings because of it. The Kraken are totally capable of doing that. We know they are because we watched them do it last year. And so that's why I still have hope. That's why I'm not ready to write them off. That's why I'm not necessarily advocating for some sort of large wholesale change. But as you said, at the same time, you have to win at some point. You have to score goals at some point. You have to look like it's possible at some point. And right now they just don't. And so it's a weird, tough spot to be in. Let me tell you, it's very strange. I don't really remember ever seeing a team quite like this, RJ, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of, the one that comes to mind is just like the Oilers earlier this season. We're watching them. There was just no indication. Well, all you could point to, is maybe 2 of the best players in the world.
Yeah, I was going to say there's that aspect of it. You could make an argument, I guess, similarly for the Minnesota Wild. And what is it? I'm taking on chat right now, RJ. What would be the first thing that people would say in chat about certainly the Oilers, and also if you were to include the Wild?
They fired their coach.
Yeah.
They made a coaching change.
Yeah. So it's again, it's one of those weird things. I'm not advocating for it, but that I do know that is what a lot of people would say. That as an argument back to us.
realistically, when you do see teams that historically have been in the bottom of the standings and have turned it around in, in a remarkable way, very few of those teams kept the same coach throughout the whole season. A lot of that has been sparked by coaching changes. And, the famous example of the 2019 St. Louis Blues,
Yes.
that was a big part of it as well.
Yeah. So, look, we're definitely acknowledging it. It is something that is there. I think that is, and I'm sure internally that's got to be kind of an elephant in the room type situation too for the Kraken. Now, on the flip side, I could see just as easily everybody being like, look, the injuries have just been brutal this year. Like, I understand that also buying a coach time, and I think that that's fair too.
Yeah, and certainly the more they continue to pile up, I think the better
Yes.
case any kind of coach has. Because our thinking like a week ago, right, is you have Jaden Schwartz out, and that is a huge blow to your scoring ability.
Certainly
But
the
at
power
least you
play.
have Burakovsky coming back,
Yep.
and you'll never have to go without both of them, and that's going to be huge. Well, guess what? They have to go without both of them for an extended stretch, and predictably, they're not really able to score goals.
Yeah, can you imagine that one, RJ? Power play struggled. Oh wow, I can't believe it. It's been a tough one there. Now, one of the bright spots of the past week has been the call up and the emergence of Ryker Evans, and he's proven me wrong. I know a lot of people have been calling for Ryker Evans to come up. I said I thought they should be patient with him, let him wait a little longer. Wasn't sure that the defense was totally there yet. And you know what, RJ? It looks like it is. I know he's playing pretty conservative right now in his third line role. He's staying home a lot. He's making sure guys just don't get past him, all that kind of stuff. But to be perfectly honest, it's kind of what this Kraken defense needed. They needed somebody to have their head on a swivel, play a little conservative, make sure guys aren't standing uncontested in front of a netminder. And you know what? Ryker Evans is doing it.
He is. And what's so impressive about it, too, is that it hasn't really held him back a ton offensively. He's still making creative plays when the moment is right. He's still jumping
Mm-hmm.
up when he needs to, and he's still influencing the game offensively. And I think that's just the perfect balance for him where he's at right now. And I think as he takes a little bit of time to get more comfortable, then he'll be able to really come out of his shell and we'll see the special things that he can do. But for the time being, he is certainly not hurting the team in the slightest. And that's something I was worried about when they decided to call him up, is that the last few games to that point, you had some defensive blunders and guys being in the wrong spots and
Yep.
giving up some bad goals. And I felt like the Kraken couldn't afford any more of that. But you know what? Ryker Evans hasn't been a part of that.
No.
I think he's, done everything you could ask for him to do. And at this point, I hope he never gets sent back down. He looks like he belongs in the NHL. Dave Haxtell has flat out said that he belongs in this league. He's ready for this league. And I think just about anyone who's watched it would agree.
I certainly agree with it, which then begs the question, RJ, of how does that affect the rest of the roster, right? Like right now it's easy because Justin Schultz is out with the injury that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. I still think it probably makes sense for Ryker to just kind of take his spot. As difficult as that is to say, I'm a big fan of Justin Schultz. I have been going back to how he entered the league and everything, right? Coming out of college and everything. But I do feel like the team, at least defensively on the back end, has looked better with Ryker in for Schultz.
Yes, and they've given it a try with a couple different options, right? You had one
Yep.
game where Evans was paired with Dumoulin, Evans being on the right side. Of course, he's left-handed, but he can play on the right side, probably better than most defensemen because he has some experience there. And then you had a game where it was Evans on the left side with Justin Schultz on the right. And so you kind of experimented with both of those. And personally, I preferred the game with Dumoulin of the first two much better. I thought that was a better fit. Dumoulin, of course, being the veteran, stay-at-home kind of guy, can cover for any pinch or mistake or anything that Ryker Evans would make. I think that's just a better fit, even though it means Evans playing on the right side. And also, you have Evans just being able to quarterback the second power play unit.
Yep.
I do like him there.
Definitely.
And I want to see him there going forward. So it just makes sense. And I mean, you pointed this out before the season started, when I was critical of the Dumoulin signing, and you said, well, Dumoulin isn't going to get in Ryker's spot. It's going to be Schultz. Like that's the spot that Ryker is meant to take because Schultz's contract is up at the end of the year. And I was skeptical just because I wasn't sure about him playing on the right side, which seemed like what would be necessary. But you were absolutely right on that. It seems like it's going to be that neat fill-in for Schultz. It won't be as neat through the rest of this season because you still have Schultz there on the roster.
Yeah.
And now you have a real position battle on your hands, I think. But after this season, it seems like, boom, he just slots right in there.
Yeah. And you know what? To be honest, the more I was thinking about it, a lot of times I go to Firebirds games, Riker's on the right side. Like I do think he is just kind of comfortable and confident there anyway, so that certainly helps things out. That then brings up the next roster question, RJ, which is, look, Magna is down with the Firebirds right now. It's a conditioning loan, right? I'm correct on that.
And they called him back up, actually.
Oh yeah,
After
they did.
The Schultz injury,
the
they
Schultz
called him
injury.
up.
Yeah, so there's that. But like once Schultz is ready to come back, are they going to keep 8 defensemen on the roster?
That is kind of dicey, actually. I mean, they've always had that extra roster spot too that they've kept. Like they've been at 21 or 22 for a lot of this season. So I think they might try and keep 8D. I don't think they'd want to send Magna through waivers because I think he'd get claimed.
Absolutely.
Certainly given his super low cap hit. Like there are a ton of teams that would love an extra defenseman there at as cheap of a contract as Magna has. As I try and look it up real quick to see if it's below league minimum salary.
I believe it is. It's 762.
Yes. Yeah. So it is, because it was signed previously when league minimum was 750. I think it's below league minimum. Yeah. What the league minimum is now. So it's very low a cap hit for a guy who's a serviceable defenseman. I mean, he went down to Coachella Valley for one game, scored a goal. We know what he can do when he gets into games. He's a solid defenseman. But yeah, I think for sure he'd get claimed, and I think they're going to try and roll with 8D as long as they want Ryker in the lineup.
Yeah, and Justin Schultz does have a modified no trade clause, as I happen to be looking at that here too. So, because things would get interesting there,
and certainly closer to the deadline if you're if you're not in the running for a playoff spot. I mean, that's a name that you'd probably feel much easier about moving at this point.
Yes, agreed. So wanted to get that context in there, and then finally, last question is, given the success Ryker is having with the Seattle Kraken, RJ, what it's done, how he's kind of helped stabilize things for them on the back end a little bit, does that make you more open to the idea of maybe a Shane Wright and giving him some playing time?
I have come around to it a little bit over the last few games. And I mean, yes, I bought into what you've said about, him being a good fit, certainly for the way that they're playing right now. But really what makes me consider it more is we talked about different levers that you can pull as a team when you're struggling. And we talked about Dave Haxtell. Getting rid of him might be the easiest, most convenient one that you can do. But the more I think about it, I kind of disagree with that as far as being the easiest. I think the easiest, simplest one you could do with the least long-term ramifications is call Shane Wright up for a week or 2 weeks and really give him a real run on the roster, because I think you can always recover from it if it doesn't work well by just sending him back to Coachella Valley for the rest of the season. 2 weeks at the NHL level, I don't think is going to hurt his development a ton. Certainly if you're giving him minutes. If you're giving him true second line minutes and really seeing what he can do, I don't see how that hurts him in the long run. If it doesn't go well, you send him back to Coachella Valley. He's got 4 months in Coachella Valley at that point afterward to just forget about all the stuff that happened in Seattle and this miserable season the Kraken are having, right? Yep. It could be a distant memory if you do it right. So that's why I'm okay with it, actually, is because I think that might really be the easiest lever to pull, even easier than changing the coach.
I'm right there with you. I mean, look, he played really well when he was up there earlier. I really liked what he was doing. Obviously, he was winning faceoffs, was a pretty successful player as far as the analytics go. Granted, he was starting in the offensive zone 80% of the time. That will help you, right? Just to be fair and real, that will definitely help you. But he looked pretty good. He passed the eye test for me. Obviously I've been on board with this for a little while now, so I would definitely consider it if I was the Kraken. All right, is there anything else, RJ, that you want to talk about here at the end of the podcast, just to some rally the troops speech you want to give somehow, or do you think look, it's just a bad rut that they're in and you think they can just kind of pull out of it this week?
I mean, I guess I'll echo what we kind of said last week, because I still think it holds true that these next 3 games, make or break, and you know what? They're at home. Yep. And, it gives the fans a chance to show up and really show out and support the guys. And I know they could use it. I know they could use all the positive energy they could get over these next 3 games, with the home crowd. And credit to them that the fans, they've been bringing it. Yep. They have. Even that last game where it felt like there was nothing to cheer about, nothing to get excited about, nothing to spark the crowd. They kind of tried coming up with their own stuff, even smaller saves. They were getting the Joey chant going in the third period, cheering after the whole Tanev done thing. And, that letting that energize them. And they never really got out of the game, which it was really cool to see. So I just hope they kind of keep that going forward. And also I should mention that we can end on this note, the national anthem. Which was a cool story. There was a microphone malfunction. The anthem singer, started singing. You couldn't hear anything. Then they handed her a second microphone and that didn't work, which, gives you the feeling, okay, well, that's how it's been going for them this season, right? But then, the fans stepped up, they played the music and the fans sang the anthem, which I thought was really cool. And, way to step up everybody and do that. And so I think that shows, the energy that's in the building and, how great the fans have been. So I don't know, stay awesome, Kraken fans, I guess is, my words of encouragement there, and really bring everything you got for these next 3 games.
Yep. I will ditto all of that. We talked about it on the post game live, right? Other markets, things would have gotten really, really ugly. They haven't here. I think that speaks volumes about the fans that the Seattle Kraken have. And they're just, everybody's fantastic. Very, very lucky to have all of you, just the way we are lucky to have everybody be supportive of us, be members of the ECH community, all that good stuff. I know they're going to show up and support Queen Anne Beer Hall, right? As they open their second location. I know they're going to show up and come and say hi to us on the 30th when we're there to check things out. And I know they're going to be kind to me as I just devour a bunch of Detroit-style pizzas in front of them, and they're not going to make me feel too bad about it.
They're going to cheer you on, Dylan. I know it.
All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening to the podcast, as always, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Absurdly Sane, Alex, Alvi, Andrew, Anonymous, Beef, Ben, Brad, Brian, Burnt Creme, Kaylin, Shazzle Dazzle, Chip, Chris, Christian, Cody, Connor, Coop, DJ Singletone, Duthin, Evie99, Eli, Elizabeth, Empty Net Hockey, Ethan, Evan, Gaby, Gary, Gregory, Harry Legionary, Habak, Jay, Jane, Jessica, Joni, Joseph, Josh, Joshua, Julia, Justin, Katie, Keegan, Kepler, Kitty B. Kraken, Kyle,
Leanne, Levin, Light, Lonnie, Maeve, Mark, Max, Maya, Michelle, Michigan Kraken, Nick, Night Drop, Noah, Nunya, Paige, Paul, Rayanne, Randall, Rebecca, Ryan, Sarah, Scott, Sia Kraken, Sean, Sergey, Sergeant Pickles, Shannon, Shoeshine, Skeletal Tendency, Steve, Steven, Striatic, Tasty Kobold, Team 114 Chris, Ty, Wendy, Where the Slovakians At, Strife, and Zame. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.